My name is John Barlow. Like I said, I've lived through what is, I like to call the OKOTOKS success story, but now what we're going to see is how that story is going to end. It's quite serendipitous that I'm following right here, is that we're going to have to deal with a lot of the same problems that are going to be maybe solved here in the next little while, but our problem in OKOTOKS is when are these problems going to be solved, because our timeline is extremely small. So what I'm going to do today is, in my next 25 minutes or so, is give you an overview of what's kind of gone on in OKOTOKS and some of the obstacles that they're facing now. Because what was a pretty interesting story about 10 years ago that has kind of caught world-renowned attention for the sustainable OKOTOKS policy, but also what kind of came out of that as our population cap, has moved along so rapidly that now we're having to see, ironically, that OKOTOKS has some pretty critical water problems of its own, and it's going to be one of the first communities in Alberta to be facing these, and it's going to be sort of the litmus test of what these solutions are going to be for Alberta and for OKOTOKS specifically. So as of right now, this is the issue that's sort of hitting OKOTOKS as we speak, is OKOTOKS has a water license capacity for about 24,500 people. Well, as of our last census, we're at 22,000 people right now, meaning we're going to max out or tap out our water within the next 3 years, likely faster than that, probably closer to 2. So the problem with that is the government of Alberta in 2005 put a moratorium on new water licenses in the South Saskatchewan River Basin, which means as of right now, OKOTOKS has no more access to any more water. We're going to have to survive with what we've got, or try and find a new water source, another water license, regional pipeline, or pipeline to Calgary, or some of the things that have been discussed. So far, of course, there hasn't been any success in getting a new water license. There's the numbers. OKOTOKS has a water license for 608 million gallons per year. Right now we're at about 580 million gallons. So as you can see, we're coming very close to that capacity. And what's going to happen when we hit that capacity in 2 years? I like to think that this is an opportunity, and like I said, I'm sort of a third-party viewer of this. I don't represent the town of OKOTOKS. I don't represent the government of Alberta. This is just how we have seen things unfold over the last few years. We think that this is a good litmus test and a good guinea pig, I guess, for the government of Alberta to help solve, or go in the right direction to solve some of Alberta's water problems. So I'll give you a quick brief history of the sustainable OKOTOKS policy. It began in about 1998, but probably the impetus started well before that with some local grassroots organizations and some movements to try and protect the Sheep River Valley. And from that, the sustainable OKOTOKS policy came about. It's not the only community in the world that's done this, but it is one that has really garnered national attention in Canada for some of the successes that it's had. And what really happened is, in the 1990s, OKOTOKS was at a crossroads. Do we keep growing at the pace we're growing, or do we decide to, put some boundaries on what we're going to do? Are we going to kind of live within the carrying capacity of the Sheep River Valley, and just try and balance things out? So I'll kind of move through these things quickly. This is what the sustainable OKOTOKS policy was built on, and from that was this population cap of about 30,000 people, which is sort of the catchphrase that everybody talks about, but it really was just a kind of a piece of the puzzle. Even though that water, like I mentioned, that water license is 24,500, the town really felt with water conservation efforts we could probably get to 30,000 people within the carrying capacity of the river. And there has been some pretty impressive successes in those years. The goal initially was to reduce water usage by about 20%. Since 1997, OKOTOKS has reduced its water usage by 50%. The average water usage was 50 liters per capita per day in 1997. Now we're down to 323 liters per capita. In comparison, High River, which is just south of OKOTOKS, about a 15-minute drive, 778 liters. Black Diamond, which is 10 minutes away, 619 liters. And Calgary is 500 liters. So that just gives you a comparison of some of the successes that OKOTOKS has had in those years. For those of you who prefer gallons, the goal of the sustainable OKOTOKS policy was to get water usage down to about 70 gallons per person per day. Right now they're at 71, so they've almost reached that goal. To compare that, we did Western Wheel did some research last year. The city of Cochrane's at 90 liters, but that's in the winter, so that does not include their water usage with irrigation, watering lawns, and those kind of things. So I would think in the summer it's significantly higher. And High River is about 200 liters per person per day. So that just shows you the difference in some of the successes that Okotoks has had with its water conservation efforts. Also an interesting stat that, the population when this was first started in Okotoks was about 10,000. Now we're at close to 23,000, and Okotoks has actually reduced its water usage per person per day. So that's a pretty telling stat right there. And another interesting piece of note is Okotoks is very successful in returning the water that it uses back into the Sheep River. It's about 80% of the return rate goes back into the river daily, which is through the water treatment system, water treatment plant. Most communities are closer to 40 or 50%, maybe even less than that. I think High River is 0 actually. Theirs is put into a swamp area, Frank Lake, which some of you may know if bird watchers out there. Town High River's water goes into the Frank Lake after it's gone through the system. So like I said, the Okotoks water policy, sustainable policy has been a great success, but now we're going to be, it's going to be tested. The success of that story is going to be tested. When it was first envisioned in 1998, it was sort of a 2020 policy, 2020 vision. Well, we've reached that 2020 much faster than anybody would have thought due to explosive growth. I think with our most recent stats, I have them up there, 47% population growth between 2000 and 2007. That was the fastest growing urban, suburban area in Canada. So it just goes to show you that people just, when the policy was first envisioned, no one expected that the growth would happen this fast. And we thought we'd have all kinds of time to solve our water problems. Well, now we don't. We've got to solve them very quickly. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Over the last year, the sustainable Okotoks policy has really been tested.